this look familiar? Yep, it's my old system, and it's up and running. So I'm here at Valley Mercantile in Academy. It's a little town just outside of Temple, and this is where my brewing system ended up at. So I posted a video, a short, on the channel a couple of days ago, kind of saying that the brew system was back in action and Czech lager was being made, which was slightly misleading because, sorry to disappoint, but it is not a new iteration of Tanglefoot Brewing. However, the system is working and we are brewing Czech lagers, and to be honest, we're brewing pretty much the same beers that I was brewing at Tanglefoot. But it's at a distillery called Valley Mercantile, and the reason that they got the system is they reached out to me a couple of months before Tanglefoot closed and said that they were interested in brewing beers out here so that they could have different drink options for their patrons in the bar in the distillery, and kind of wanted to pick my brain on how to make that happen. So I started talking with John, the owner, before I had announced that I was closing Tanglefoot, about putting a beer program in here and kind of what it would take to get that up and running. After a couple of conversations, they mentioned that they really liked the beers that I produced at Tanglefoot and were looking to potentially replicate something similar. Then I announced that I was going to be closing Tanglefoot, and that's when it kind of like kicked everything into gear. And they said, hey, if you're not going to be brewing on the system anymore, are you going to sell it? What are you going to do with it? And I said I was likely going to sell the system. So they said that they'd be interested in buying it turnkey. So what happened was I sold the equipment and all of the kegs and the kegerator and the Lucre taps to them so that they could build a beer program here. But what also happened was we talked about basically replicating the beer styles that I was brewing at Tanglefoot, Czech lager specifically, out here because they really enjoyed the beers and they thought it would be appropriate for the clientele out here at the distillery. So we moved the equipment several months ago and kind of kept everything hush-hush until the license was approved by TABC and TTB. And once that happened, we started getting the equipment connected and up and running so that we could brew beer. Last week was our first brew day on the system, and I wanted to kind of give an overview of what this beer program is going to be. So while it's not Tanglefoot Brewing, the brand, it is going to be pretty much the same beers and a few custom beers for this place in particular so that they kind of have their own thing going. But John is a distiller and a farmer out here in Academy, and he has a background in distillation and knows how fermentation works, but hasn't really had a lot of beer experience. So I'm kind of helping them through the first several batches of beer and providing them recipes and guidance on how to use the system. And so they're going to be brewing 10 degree, 12 degree, 13 degree, and possibly 14 degree, as well as one or two special beers that I'll create recipes for them specifically, potentially one that's going to utilize their grain bill that they use in their whiskey. So having said all that, I wanted to walk through the system and kind of show you the layout and the changes that have been made, because honestly, it is a much better system now that they took the they took the reins and adapted it to this distillery, and it works so much better than it did at Tanglefoot. So let's go check it out and kind of look at all the modifications. So the first big difference here at Wilson Valley as opposed to Tanglefoot is the cold liquor situation. Now they are a distillery and they have fermentations happening that they need to maintain temperature on, just like in a brewery. So they have a glycol chiller. Well, that's great, but they use this to cool down water to cool the tanks and moderate the temperature. And to do that, they use this guy, a big ass cold liquor tank. This is actually an old dairy tank, I believe, but they have about 350 gallons of water in this thing that they can maintain at whatever temperature they want. So knocking out the beer is so much easier when you have a large amount of cold water, and that's what they have here. So it makes knockout a breeze so much easier. So that's the first big change from working here in the system. The second really big change is they adapted this system, these tanks, from being direct fire to electric. So what they did, well, it's hard to see because there's water in here and there's wort in there, but they put 3 heating elements inside of each of these tanks and control it with switches and a PID to maintain temperature if you want to. This is all turned on manually because we are about to boil, so we don't need to really maintain temperature. But I was slightly concerned with the modifying these into electric because I've never personally worked on an electric system, but I know that you need the right amount of wattage to be able to boil effectively and heat effectively. And so these 3 elements in these tanks work really well, brings the wort up to a boil pretty quickly, and is so effective and vigorous that we actually have to isolate just one of the heating elements in order to not boil over like crazy. So that's the next really big modification. You can see the old glycol chiller up there that is piped into these tanks. We've got the fermentation vessels. This fermentation vessel is already filled with a batch of 10-degree pale lager. And the last general, it's not really a modification, but it's a different experience in this facility, is that this facility was built for production of spirits. So you've got floor drains, heavy duty power, bunch of water access points, high flow rates, which they did adapt to have a nice water manifold that is controlled over here by a flow meter, so we can dial in exactly how many gallons go into those tanks. So generally just having the access to the utilities that you need to brew beer and kind of wash things down to the drain is really, really nice, and is a, you know, head and shoulders above the location that I was working at with Tanglefoot. So the system's up and running. It's running great. We did one brew day so far, and it was really, really positive. Feel good about it. Another thing that was interesting about this system is that they have this giant mill for all of the grain that they use in the distillation process. And so we tested that out to make sure that it can mill grain effectively, and it has so far. So pretty happy with the results there. Got to check our sparge. Running a little dry, so I'm going to speed up this pump. There we go. And this is John.
Howdy.
He's the owner of Valley Mercantile. He decided to put this system in the distillery so that they can make some Czech lager.
Well, I can give you a brief rundown. Yep. So really what the distillery started as was us trying to figure out a way, or myself trying to figure out a way to make corn worth more money. We've been farming and ranching right here in Wilson Valley since about 1867, or my family has. And it turned into a lot more of a, how can we tell our story about the last, well, I'm fifth generation, so the last 4 generations of the folks before me, and trying to keep it all together. So the distillery is my piece of trying to keep all that history together, and a way to tell that story now. So column's still behind me. I'm actually working on cleaning it right now, getting ready to start production back up. I shut down producing during the summer months because we're busy on the farm and ranch and just have more things to do than I can manage. So I don't do that, and fermentations are hard to control in an open fermenter and when it's 105 plus outside. So 150 gallon column still, fluted column still, reflux still. There's a whole bunch of different names you can call it. So whenever we're running whiskey, we run through the first column, the copper column there. It's got 5 plates in it. So effectively, after it's been through the distillation in the pot and the 4 plates, that spirit has been distilled 5 times. If you want to make a neutral spirit, you'd go through the through the whiskey column, and then the big tall stainless steel column with what is that, 16 plates in it. So by the time you've made it through there, that product's been effectively distilled 21 times. So whiskey column's capable of producing about 170 proof ethanol. The vodka column about 192, 93 proof. So basically white lightning. Any way you look at it, I guess it's white lightning. Can also do gin, and it's been fun. We've been open for just right at 2 years now, and y'all come see us sometime. Soon we'll have beer.
Yeah, more Czech lager to come.
More Czech lager to come.
Nice. So the last big consideration with this system being out here is that their water source is a well water source. So tons of minerals in it, which are, you know, definitely something to consider when you're building out your water chemistry tables, when you're building out your recipe. So we've done some adjustments here and there and still trying to fine tune it, but pretty hard water. So far though, have had good results. Interested to see how the first beer turns out, what the flavor profile is. I'm assuming it's going to be quite kind of dry and, well, minerally. So we'll have to probably compensate with some caramel malts here and there to make it a more robust malt character so that the dryness of the water doesn't make the beers off balance. But that is pretty much the overview of this system here. And I'm very excited for this to come to fruition and make this announcement, because John's a great guy. All the people out here have been super awesome, and they're going to be keeping these beers alive in Bell County, which is great. So come out here if you're ever in the Temple area or Academy. Come out here to see them at Wilson Valley Mercantile. Oh, I forgot. We also got our old friends here. So they're going to be pouring beer off these Lucre taps. And this is the tap room. It's pretty beautiful, pretty big. They have a little upstairs loft, and they have music out here all the time. So pretty dope little venue. They have an Airbnb on the property, I think. So check them out. So anyways, that's it. That's the overview of the brewery and where my equipment went. Sorry to anybody that reached out to me asking for, you know, if they wanted to buy the equipment, but it was sold turnkey in the county that I was already in, so it worked out really, really nicely. And I'm gonna be helping them for the next few weeks, getting these beers in tanks and showing them the ropes on the brewing process. So yeah, come out and have a beer sometime. Cheers.